Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I'm going to keep talking about the adaptation of the card or board game Mini Rogue that I'm making, that I've been talking about in the last few videos. If you've been following those videos, you've seen how we've set up a system for choosing which graphic you want to represent your character, for choosing the difficulty, and for shuffling the cards and laying them out, and also having hover text so that when you look at a given card, it'll tell you exactly what happens when you land on that card. Having done all those things, we need to do two more things before we have a game. The first thing, we need to program all of the different cards and what they do. So all of the stuff that comes up in this hover text, in this case we've got space pirates that you fight, abandoned spaceship that you find things on. This peaceful planet gives you various options to improve some of your stats. This planet lets you buy and sell things, and so on. We need to program all those individual cards, and secondly, we need a system for moving from card to card. So we need to have a system that knows that once you've dealt with this card, you're going to have a choice between these two cards, and then once you've dealt with whichever of those cards you choose, you have to go to this card, and then again, then you'll have another choice of two cards, and then that'll be the end of this layout of the cards, and you'll start again, but this time you'll have the hostile aliens card, because the hostile aliens card appears at set intervals, and it will also need to keep track of how many times you've gone through the cards, because that's the victory condition for the game. If you go through 15 spreads of the cards, you win the game. So it will need to keep track of where you are for sort of victory purposes, and also so it knows when to bring that hostile aliens card out. I have added something to the sidebar. It says Sector 1. I think I've been talking about each spread of the cards as being a solar system, but I just thought Sector was a sort of better name for the science fiction retheme, because the original game is sort of Dungeons and Dragons style fantasy, and it just calls them areas, and I'm changing it to a science fiction theme. So I need to sort of come up with terms for all of the variables, new terms for all of the stats. So I decided to do the second thing first. I decided to do the system for moving from card to card, and then I'm going to work on the individual cards after that. So let's look at. I'll just demonstrate what that looks like. I have a system of moving from card to card, but it doesn't, because I haven't programmed it yet, it doesn't actually do any of the things that the cards are supposed to do. It's just the overall sort of flow of the game. So we have this continue button here. We have this artwork, which is the same as the artwork on the card, and there's just a little note that says interact with S. This is card S. And then when we continue, we have this new bit of text which says choose one of the two cards to the right of your counter by clicking it, and if you move the mouse pointer over those two cards, it becomes a hand, which indicates that it's a link. So we can click on one of those. Let's click on that one. It moves the counter there. We choose continue. We interact with that one, and it moves it automatically to there, because we don't get a choice of where to go from there. And now we have another choice. And once we finish this, because this is the end of the spread of cards, should find that this sector attribute goes up by 1, and that we start again on the left-hand side with a new spread of cards. The cards should be in a different order, and also the hostile aliens card should now be in play. And we see that, yes, these are all now in a different order. The hostile aliens card is there, and we're in sector 2. So that's what it looks like. And I'll now show you what the code looks like. So we'll just X out of that and get into the code. So if you've been following this series, and if you remember what it looked like last time, you'll notice that there's a lot of new pages. There's these 7 new pages, one for each of the cards, and named after the card. A, C, P, Q, R, S, and H are just the names that the cards have within the program. Then we have this other new page called Progress. Also, I've added a fair bit of code to the card page, and there's one new attribute that I need to explain to you, so you can sort of understand what this code is doing. But there's not as much new stuff as there seems to be, because all of these pages, although they will be different because each of them is what happens on a given card, at the moment they're all basically the same. They all have this div that brings up the image of that banner picture. It's that's the only difference. Which banner it brings up is different for each page, of course. Then it has a little note that says interact with, well, I suppose that's different as well, interact with A or C or whatever the card may be. And then it has a button which you click to take you to the progress page, which is where most of the new code is. So let's look. So, in other words, there's not much point showing you the other 6 of those because they'll just be the same with a different letter. So this one will say banner C instead of banner A, and interact with C instead of interact with A. All right, so let's have a look at initialize, and the variable that we need to talk about is T. So you noticed that, well, you probably noticed that when we display the cards, in some stages you don't get a choice. You have to press the continue button, and in other stages you get a choice of 2 cards. But of course, it's a different 2 cards at different parts of the game. In other words, after the first card, you get a choice of card 2 or card 3, and then after the 4th card, you get a choice of card 5 or card 6. So there's 3 possibilities. There's 2 separate choices of 2 cards, or you might not get a choice and you have a continue button. So if we're going to have all that happen on the same page, we need to have some variable that keeps track of which one is the appropriate one to do, at this particular time. And that's what T does. It starts at 0, set T equals 0, and it's always either 0, 1, or 2. And 0 means button which sends you to $S square bracket $C n square bracket. I'll explain what that means when we get to it. And then 1 means a choice between card 2 and card 3, and 2 means a choice between card 5 and card 6. So it'll be initially 0 because that's the first thing that happens. You don't get a choice straight away. You just get a continue button that sends you to whichever the first card is. So let's look at that. It says here button which sends you to $S square bracket $C n square bracket, and we can see on the display screen that now we have this code down here where if t is equal to 0, then we have this code here where we set z equal to a particular bit of code, and then we print that code. And if t doesn't equal 0, then it has that message that says choose one of the two cards to the right of your counter by clicking it. So let's go through what this means. Well, first of all, we're going to need to know what $S square bracket $C n square bracket is. So let's refresh our memories. $C is your current position within the sector. Last video I noticed that the explanation of what it wasn't, I didn't think it was very good, so I've slightly rewritten it. But it refers to where you are in the card spread, your position in the card spread, and it starts at 1, and it goes up as you move. So I thought it was most logical to number them from left to right, because that's how writing works and also how the game works. So C is your current position, and S is an array that has the names of the cards in an order which is different each time you go through the cards. So it starts like this. It starts with A, C, P, Q, R, S, and H, but it then immediately shuffles, not H because H is always in that N position, but A, C, P, Q, R, and S, it shuffles them into a random order each time. So $S square bracket $C n square bracket is going to be the slot in this array that that is your position in the spread of cards. In other words, it's the card that you're on. So if your player counter, you being the player in this case, if the player counter is on the Peaceful Planet card, then $S square bracket $C n square bracket is going to be P. So when we see $S n square bracket $C n square bracket, we know it's going to be a single letter, and it's going to be the card that the counter is on, basically. So let's go back to that display and go back to this long bit of code. So we're going to set Z to be, and I'll type it out as we go. We have less than, button, quote, continue. Oh, there's a space. There should be a space between the button and the quote too. Continue, which is just the message that appears on the button. And then we have plus SC. So that's going to be the name of the card that they're currently on. So let's say P. Oh, sorry, it's continue, quote, and then it's going to be the name of the card, so something like that. And then plus, greater than, less than, slash, button. So this line of code is going to generate something like this, with the difference being it'll be whatever card the player happens to be on, and then it prints all that. So it prints a button that says continue and sends you to page Q or page A or page whatever it is, depending on what card you're on. And that is why we have these cards, these pages, and the name of each of the page is the same as the names of the cards. Unfortunately, buttons don't create arrows. If we have include or go to, that creates one of these arrows, but having a button doesn't create the arrows. That's why there's no arrow. There's no arrows between display and any of these pages. And similarly, these pages have a button, and the button takes you to the page progress. But again, that doesn't create an arrow. So that's why it sort of seems like these are isolated pages. It's just a quirk of the system that it doesn't create arrows for them. Okay, so that's what the that's what happens at the start of the game when t equals 0. The other possibility is that we won't get that. T won't be equal to 0, and instead we'll get this text which says choose one of the two cards to the right of your counter by clicking it. Well, how do we make that happen? How do we make the cards clickable? Well, it's not on this page. It's on the card page. The rest of the code on this page is exactly the same as it was yesterday. So let's go to the card page, and we scroll past the code which I've dealt with, where we're working out basically the hover text. Here is the relevant code, and it's fairly short. It's only a few lines, but it's quite sort of dense. So first, to explain this, firstly I need to explain again how the image command works. So we always have a square bracket, we always have img, we always have another square bracket, then we have the location and name of the picture that we're talking about. So let's say art slash let's say qm.png, n square bracket. Now we have a choice. We can put a square bracket there, and that's fine, and that just displays the picture. But we also might want to make that picture into a link. And the way we do that is, instead of having an n square bracket there, we have, in fact, I'll do it on 2 lines. So that's a plain, so that's just a picture. But we can have a picture that's also a link. So we might have something like this. And then we might have destination, and then we have a square bracket. What that means is the second one that I typed there will print the picture. It'll go into the art folder. It'll look for the picture qm.png. It'll print it. It'll make it a link. If the player clicks the link will go to the page destination. So it'll go to whatever you put in there. But we can do more than that. We can also go something like this. Let's say okay, so that is a link with variable changes. What that means is, what this third one means is, go into the art folder, look for qm.png, print it, make it a link to the page destination, and if the player clicks that link, as well as going to the destination, also set A to have the value of 7 and set B to have the value of B plus 2. In other words, add 2 to B. So what we're doing down here, we don't use that middle one. It's either just a picture or it is a link with variable changes. So up to this point, I've already explained this code, so I won't go into it in detail, but we'll have something like this. We'll have div title equals lots of hover text. There's quite, as you probably saw, there's quite large amounts of hover text to explain what happens on each card. img art slash, let's say, p, and then if and then we might add in particular cases we'll add $G, which is M or F, to indicate that it's got a counter picture on it. But anyway, we'll end up with something like that. At this point here, we will have created something like that. Now we have a choice, and it's quite there's an if there, and it's quite complicated. So what it says is if t is equal to 1 and either z is equal to 2 or z is equal to 3, or t is equal to 2 and z is equal to 5 or z is equal to 6. Now, z means which card we're currently displaying, as in which number in the spread, which position in the spread we're currently displaying, and t, we've already discussed, means the what's happening in this display. Is it a choice, or is it just a oops, sorry, I just clicked the wrong one then. Is it a choice, or is it just a continue button? So just to refresh your memory and my own, t, if t is 0, then there's a continue button. If t is 1, then you have a choice between card 2 and card 3. And if t is 2, you have a choice between card 5 and card 6. So if t is 1, card 2 and card 3 should be links. And if t is 2, card 5 and card 6 should be links. So that explains what you see in this code. It says if t equals 1 and z, which is the current card, is 2 or 3, or if t equals 2 and z is either 5 or 6. In other words, if we are printing a card which should be a link, that's basically what this code boils down to. If we're printing a card that, based on t and based on which card we're printing, should be a link, then we do whatever's in here. And whatever's in here will be, we add display, so that's telling it, make this card a link, a clickable link, and it's a link that goes to display. And then we have another square bracket that says t equals 0 and c equals whatever the card is. So if we're printing card 2, that'll say 2, 3, 5 or 6, depending on whatever the current card is. In other words, as you'd expect, you click on card 3 to indicate that you want to go to card 3. You click on card 5 to indicate that you want to go to card 5. And then we add the square bracket. So that's what happens in that code. And then at the end there, we add n square bracket and div. And if this isn't the case, then we won't add any of that, and we'll just have a normal picture. But we've already sort of talked about that possibility, so let's talk about this. So when we say print y, if this was triggered, if this is a card that's going to be a link, then we will end up printing something like this. Now, I'll get rid of the divs because we've sort of dealt with them, and let's just deal with the image command in particular. We can see that this is an example of this. So I'll get rid of that as well so we can make it easier to compare. This, in other words, this code is an example of a picture that is a link that also changes some variables. So we'll print the card. The link will be to display, and we set t to 0 and we set c to 3. So what does that mean? Well, setting t to 0 means that it sets it to be it'll be a display in which there is no choice of links, it's just a continue button. So what will happen is we get the choice, we click on the link, it displays again. The counter has now moved because the counter is always displayed on wherever, on whichever card it's currently on. And t is set to 0, meaning this isn't one where there's a choice now. There's just going to be a continue button. So that will make what you saw happen, because card is called as part of display. So it displays the cards. It turns the relevant cards into links. When the player clicks one of those links, it says, right, now we're not displaying links anymore. We're just having a continue button. Also, we need to, so that's setting T to 0. We also need to set C to whatever the card they've chosen is. So what the player will see is they'll see the counter move effectively. The player counter will move, and there'll be a continue button, and that continue button will send the player to whichever one of these whichever one of those pages is relevant. Each one of those pages, as we've seen, goes to progress. Now, progress is again fairly complicated. This is where we decide, well, what happens now? We've interacted with a card, and we've finished interacting with the card, and presumably we're still alive. If the game was over, it wouldn't continue. So we're flying off again. So what needs to happen now? Well, what happens now mostly depends on C. You'll remember that the spread of the cards is like this. We have card 1, and then we have cards 2. It's not going to really look very nice. We have cards 2 and 3 sort of directly on top of each other. And we have card 4. That's a terrible, you know what, I'm going to try and do this better. Okay, so we have cards 1 and 2. We have card 4. And then sometimes, so I'll put that in brackets to indicate that it's not always there, we have card 7. Okay. All right, so this is the basic layout. You have card 1, then you have card 2 or 3, you have a choice of those. Then you have card 4, then you have a choice of card 5 or card 6, and then sometimes that's the end of the spread, and you need to do a new spread and start again. And sometimes you have card 7, which is definitely the end of the spread if it is present. So that will govern how this works. So it mostly works on $C, which is the current where you are in this. So if C is 1, then we set T to 1, which is the value that corresponds to a choice between cards 2 and 3, and we include display. Well, that's fairly straightforward. If the card is 4, we're going to do something very similar. We set T to 2 and include a display. So that's fairly straightforward. If C is 2 or 3, then they both go to 4, and we go straight to display. Now we have a slightly more complicated. So we've dealt with 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have 5, 6, and 7 to go. Now, if $C equals $L square bracket $A n square bracket, or $C is equal to 5 and $L n square bracket $A, sorry, $L square bracket $A n square bracket is equal to 6. Then we have this code, and then this code is split up on whether A is equal to 15 or something else. So this is quite complicated. And then we have this simple one at the end. But let's deal with this complicated one. What does all that mean? Well, what is $L and $A? Well, we know what $A is. It's the area that you're in. It's how many times you've been. Are you on your first run through the cards, or your second, or your third, or your fifth, or whatever it is? What is $L? $L is the length. It's the number of cards that need to be laid out depending on which run of through the cards you're in. And this is set by the rules of the game. Basically, it's whether the hostile aliens card appears. And you have one area without it. It's always going to be 6 or 7. You have one area without the hostile aliens card, one with, one without, one with, 2 without, 1 with, 2 without, 1 with, and then finally 3 without and 1 with. And then if you get through all that, you've won the game. So L square bracket $A n square bracket is just how many cards are in the spread currently. Is it 6 cards in this spread, or is it one of the 7 card spreads? So let's get back to this. So if C is equal to LA, well, what that means is if you're on card 6 and there's only 6 cards in the spread, or you're on card 7 and there's 7 cards in the spread, but not if you're on card 6 and there's 7 cards in the spread. In other words, if you're on that card and it's the last card, and if you're on that card and it's the last card, or if you're on card 5 in a 6 card spread. Because if you're on card 5 in a 6 card spread, you don't go to card 6 and you don't go to card 7 because there's no card 7. You end and you start with a new spread. So those are the 3 conditions, or 2 conditions, sorry, where you're at the end of the card spread. All this is saying is if the player is at the end of the card spread. And if that's the case, then one of 2 things will happen. Either this is your 15th run through the cards, in which case you've won the game. There should be some sort of message. I haven't worked out exactly what they'll be yet. Otherwise, congratulations, you've got through that spread. Time for a new spread. So we add 1 to A. I said set A equals A plus 1. I could have said set A plus plus, but didn't occur to me at the time. Anyway, we set A to be 1 more than it was. We set C equal to 1. In other words, we start again at the leftmost card. And instead of going to display, we go to shuffle, because we need to reorder the cards. Because if it was the same each time, it would be too easy, of course. So we shuffle the cards and we lay them out, and we start again with the player at the first card. And then we have else. So what are the conditions when would this happen? Well, it would happen when, because we've dealt with 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we've dealt with all of the other 3, we've dealt with all cases where you're at the end of the spread. So it would only happen, and if you're at card 7, you're always at the end of the spread. So the only other possibility that we haven't yet covered is that you're at card 5 or card 6, but not yet at the end of the spread. In other words, you're in card 5 or card 6, but there is a card 7. And in that case, we just set the card to be equal to 7 and go to display. So it looks quite complicated, but if you bear this structure in mind, it makes sense. And if you bear in mind that this just means if you're at the end of the spread, if there isn't another card in the spread to go to, then we need to either tell the player they've won the game or set up a new sector. And so those are all of the sort of possibilities that can happen in the game, and that moves the player counter to where it needs to be, to a new card or right back to the beginning with a new spread. So there's a lot of different sort of bits there, but I hope that what I said made sense. Coming up, of course, we need to start working on these ones. Once we've programmed all the different things that can happen in the different cards, then we will have a game. that will probably take more than one video, I'd say, because there's like, even though there's a small number of cards, they're all quite different. But we'll see what happens. But for now, I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.